And now, without further ado, our new luncheon program. And so Dexter and JC, if you would come up, and we'll hand it off to you. But only before we do the appropriate change. Take it away.
Here we go. Sound check? People hear me okay? Awesome, all right. Everybody have a good lunch? Yeah? People falling asleep yet? We'll try to keep you all engaged. We'll keep this short and sweet here. So we'll get a little bit of that lunch afterward because I don't think any of us had them. So did folks get that pin in their bags yet? Has anybody put that on? Can I just say how fantastic these pins are? This little Nebraska one right here. Take a look in your bags if you don't have it already. So, all right. My name is Dexter Liu. I'm an executive director of our development team in the central region of the United States for NextEra Energy Resources. Lauren sure did a good job explaining NextEra, so I won't go back into that again. But my team is about 45 developers at NextEra that is responsible for developing wind, solar, and battery storage across the central United States. That's all the states in SPP, including Nebraska, the northern part of MISO, and Colorado. In Nebraska, specifically, we've got over 500 megawatts of wind projects in operation, and we're proud to be able to bring online another 900 megawatts of solar and battery storage over the next 18 months. With me here, I've got JC, and JC was here last year, but for those who don't know him, he's now the Chief Policy Officer of the American Clean Power Association. JC is an experienced leader with 18 years working in our industry. He's held roles in advocacy and policy at ACP, government affairs and policy at GE Renewable Energy, counsel at Baker Donaldson on energy and infrastructure issues, and counsel for the U.S. Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. So long, rich history in this industry. We're really excited to have JC here today. JC, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how that led to where you are today in your role? How'd you get into this field?
Well, thank you for having me, and it was really special to see those two gentlemen recognized, and I might take his. We've come a long way, and we've got a long way to go. I started my career as a Senate lawyer and meandered my way through many jobs in Washington, but I think the place where I found the most sense of purpose is in this industry, and I think that I really admire the work that you do. I think that people at a state and local level are so important to what this industry has become and the distance that we've traveled together. And so my job day to day is just to really do our best to create policy and then advocate for those policies to advance the industry.
Awesome, thanks JC. So last year you did this fireside chat with Kevin Gilday from NextEra as Chief Advocacy Officer. You're in a new role as Chief Policy Officer. Can you tell us what's changed since then?
Just the title. So we just, as we've gotten, with a change of administration, there's been more of a focus on the policies that we create and how we create them, and then how do we message those policies. More, even before we take that advocacy step, which is where we hand the piece of paper with the shiny talking points to an advocate at a federal, state, or local level to go to a decision maker and try and influence the outcome. And so I'm a little long in the tooth. I've been around for a long time. I had really good training at GE. I was able to partner with companies like NextEra and other large IPPs and utilities in the space. And so they asked me if I would take a switch and really focus on how we develop policy. Just for one example, like how do we engage in organized markets, right? Whether it's SPP or whether it's MISO, whether it's in the non-RTO West, which is obviously not an organized market, but how do we advance transmission policy that's favorable to the industry? And so, before we advance that policy again, we have to create it, and so it's been my job to create that stuff.
Got it. It's been a quiet year so far, right? Nothing really big happening in industry, no major changes at all.
So I would say the CEO of our place likes to say it this way: the future is bright and every day is a crisis. So I think that pretty much sums it up. And I think when we take a step back and we look at the long-term trajectory of this industry, we are so much a part of the generation mix in this country that we're not going to go anywhere. And I also think that it's not just a convenient talking point. You all know that we need every electron, and electrons don't have political persuasion. And so we need all the power we can get. And we put out an interesting chart, which I failed to post on my own LinkedIn, about kind of minding the supply gap, right? If we kept every existing coal asset on the grid, if we did all the gas that's planned, we still have an incredible shortage of supply when we look just face into what we're anticipating just with data centers, right? That has nothing to do with electrification of anything. It doesn't have much to do with kind of the return of manufacturing to this country that's currently happening. And so we just need everything, and I think that need, the demand for everything, will be at the end of the day what kind of pushes all this through and lets us deploy what we need to deploy.
Well said, JC. And I know our topic here today is focused on states and communities here, but I think it would be a lost opportunity if we didn't talk to JC about his view from Washington, right? He sees everything from a federal level, brings it back to our states, to our local communities, helps out through ACP here. So give us the view, JC, from DC. What's the bird's eye view on renewables and energy storage, the industry? What's the state of health right now?
I think, federal intervention and bureaucratic inaction or uncertainty is always tough. And I think that capital chases certainty, certainly, and right now it's kind of an uncertain time. And I think that how we're seeing that play out is not a go another way so much as a pause. But those pauses are, you can't pause forever and you won't pause indefinitely. And so I think where it's not just our industry, but other industries are kind of watching what's happening, and it's kind of not how we do business in the U.S. We need that business and policy certainty. And with that business and policy certainty, it unlocks hundreds of billions of dollars of capital. And so we are facing some headwinds. It is a bit bumpy. I couldn't stand here and tell you otherwise. I wouldn't be credible. But I don't think those problems are insurmountable. And I don't think that's naive kind of optimism. I think that that's just President Biden didn't want oil and gas until gas prices went up, right? And then all of a sudden they wanted oil and gas. And I think that this administration is starting to realize that the price of electricity for a lot of reasons is going up, but they don't want to be a part of the reason why it goes up. And so I think at the end of the day, that carries the day. But I think we're kind of in that messy middle right now.
Yeah, and JC, to your point about data centers earlier, that's where the growth is. We need all the power to get this online here. But these headwinds are challenging. We at NextEra focus on this every day, every week, trying to get and navigate those. So let's go through a couple of them, just because they're a macro level lens of what we deal with day to day. Talk to us about, first, maybe the government shutdown, since that's live and in process right now. What are you seeing from there? What impacts are you seeing right now from that?
Obviously it has an impact. I think one of the things, if you were a wind developer, if the government was operating or shut down, there wasn't, candidly, a hell of a lot of difference. But I do think for the solar and storage aspects of this, and where there's federal nexus, which needs federal permitting, I think that was moving apace. I think a shutdown is just bad. I should have said this at the top. It's no way to govern, right? And there's enough blame to go around for all the political parties. But I think what it's done specifically to this industry is it's really put a pause on everything, right? Even the things that weren't impacted by the myriad executive orders that have been coming out to target the industry. So things like the FAA office that processes your determinations of no hazard. I see heads nodding. Things like the Department of Defense clearinghouse, things like all these things just kind of grind to a halt. And that bureaucratic inaction and uncertainty it's never good for any industry, and ours is no exception.
Yeah, I'd like to say I think we can all agree that we'd like the federal government to resume at this point, and hopefully we get there soon as well. So that's one headwind we're facing right now. The other of several, right, tariffs. And so I don't think we've talked about that extensively today in any of the earlier panels, but we've got a lot of tariff uncertainty. We've got announcements coming out every week or every other week. What are you seeing from your view? How have your members reacted to the tariff uncertainty so far? And maybe most importantly, is there anything we can do as an industry to help advocate for more certainty here?
No, I think the industry is doing its best to advocate for certainty. I think tariffs are, it's a hard thing, right? There's always an existential debate about carrots versus sticks. And tariff policy is a big stick. You saw when this race to the bottom started some years ago, it didn't necessarily bring a lot back, right? It didn't reshore a lot. It probably friend-shored more than reshored a lot of those tariff components. The last administration, the Biden administration, candidly didn't do much to provide a lot of relief on that front. And then the Trump administration this time around has taken an even more aggressive policy position in that space. And so you're seeing, and it's number soup, so if this means anything to any of you, great. If it doesn't, come find me after. Just 301 tariffs, which were the original ones. There's been 232 actions around national security. The one right now that's kind of two most kind of front and center for the industry right now are steel and aluminum, and another one on wind components. There's another one that's out there on 232 on poly. What would that mean to solar? And it won't be the end. There'll be others. And then before the Supreme Court, there is a decision on the IEEPA. Does the president have the authority constitutionally and statutorily to do those types of things? There'll be a decision there, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so I think if you're reading this, you just know that tariffs are adding cost. What's the solution to that? I do think that on the carrot side, one thing, whether you agree with the politics around how these bills got passed, both the Inflation Reduction Act or this last One Big Beautiful Bill, there were carrots in there for manufacturing, and those carrots are actually working, right? They're bringing back manufacturing in this industry and in this space. And so, you know, if we employ 122,000 people in the manufacturing, clean energy manufacturing space, given the trajectory of plan openings and project planned announcements with some certainty, you could see over 500,000 jobs in that space before the end of the decade. So it is real, and it's across the tech, right? It's bringing, wind is incredibly domestic, more domestic than you think, but then it makes a lot of sense. It costs a lot to ship big blades and nacelles and towers. Solar is becoming more domestic by the day, and people are making huge investments in storage. And so those industries are coming back, and they should, right? Will it ever completely be here? One thing I learned at GE is that you never want to be dependent on one source of supply, and many of you in the room run businesses and know that. So how do we kind of do here what we want to do here? What are the highest value-added things? What are the things that we can do first to make that work? This is a long answer on tariffs, but I think those manufacturing plants don't come, and it's, you know, we go way downstream first. You need market certainty. You can't have manufacturing without projects, and you kind of can't have the projects without the manufacturing, because it's this perverse incentive that if we have one without the other, kind of that the cycle is broken. And so tariffs are tough. It's hard to plan for those things. It's up and it's down, and just when you think you've made a sourcing decision on a very long cycle project, something else comes in, and holy cow, did I contract for that? Did I indemnify against that? All the things that you all do on a daily basis we're watching and trying to help in real time at a national level by telling your story. And some of you have been to Washington to tell your story. More and more are coming. I know, you know, NextEra is a great example of a company that brings folks that kind of talk about how these things are impacting things day to day.
Yeah, and while that uncertainty exists, right, when NextEra talks to their customers, the utilities, their suppliers, all their partners in the community, I think it's just important for us all to be open-eyed and transparent about what's going on, about the risk of the uncertainty over tariffs. So encourage those conversations as we work together as an industry to work around those here. So we talked a lot about headwinds, JC. So what about some of the tailwinds from a federal level? What are you seeing there?
Well, I think, you know, there's policy certainty, at least through, I mean, there were some changes this last go around, but there's time to plan for and kind of this strategic, orderly unwinding of tax credits. I think that for everything except storage has kind of got a longer tail. I think there is a growing recognition of the need for energy in this country, and that it has to come from all forms, like the real all of the above. You know, it was kind of a convenient talking point before, depending on who was in power. I really do think that there is an honest recognition of the need for more power. So I think demand is a huge push. As Dexter said, when I was at GE long ago, when I started long ago, it was all about beating the avoided cost of gas, right? Coal plants were retiring, and you deploy clean if you could, and if it beat the avoided cost of gas, which was that next fuel kind of priced in the stack. So we're not there anymore. We literally need everything. And so I do view the demand and the demand for power as a tailwind. I think that the resurgence of American manufacturing, I think, is a real tailwind. But again, you have to have the projects and the throughput on your projects to be able to continue to maintain that supply base. And so I would say those are two big tailwinds. If I'm honest, though, there is a significant headwind. I don't think that it's insurmountable, like I said, to start, but I do think those two things give me confidence that we'll be able to work through this in the longer term, the medium and longer term.
And JC, one of the things we talk about in NextEra is the speed to deployment of wind and solar specifically. And I think that's where maybe we have a natural advantage in that we've got projects ready to go. We're not waiting 5 or 6 years for gas turbines to come online. Would you agree with that sentiment, that there's a natural time advantage right now for these projects?
I would, and I think it's always interesting. You know, 5 years ago we talked as gas was the bridge to renewables, and now you're hearing the flip, right? That renewables are the bridge to gas. But I do think we're what's ready to deploy, we're what's in the queue. Over 90% of what got deployed last year was clean. It's probably high, right? Do we ever want 90% of anything? Like, go us. But, you know, I think that that there is this need to do stuff now, I guess is the best way of saying it. I do think that there is a need for some queue reform, how do we get these projects in the ground faster. If you have 2,000 gigawatts of projects stuck in queues right now, that's a lot of energy, and it's mostly clean. And you've seen some line skipping with some of these proposals of varying degrees in MISO and SPP and potentially PJM and some of these other places. But I think we're what's ready to deploy now. But it's more than that. If it's one thing if we're just the thing that's ready to deploy, but we're also the most cost-effective solution. And so I think the combination of those two things are, again, what carries the day. It's the glass that's half full. And I think that you can't deny the economics of these projects, right? And so everyone loves gas at below $3, but we all know that gas doesn't always stay below $3. And so I think that there's also advantages, natural fuel hedge advantages as well to our technology.
Certainly a place for multiple technologies, right? So let's switch over now. So we talked a lot about federal. JC gave his view of what's happening in Washington, how that impacts us federally. Let's bring this to the local communities here, given our topic here. So JC, can you tell us a little bit about ACP's work on local county level policy in support of renewables and battery storage?
Sure. So, you know, we are never ever, and I heard someone talking at lunch, we are never going to be the advocates that you are locally, nor should we be. But what we can do is provide you with tools. And there was a gentleman talking about starting his legal career and, you know, talking about, you know, if you're the supporting or opposing, you need to be from the place, right? If your opposition is local and you're from 3 or 5 counties over, like it's not the same, right? And holy cow, I'm not 3 or 5 counties over, I'm states over. And so I think for us at a local level, it's how do we arm you with the best possible data? How do we get into the social media stream? How do we help you put yourselves in that stream? How do we help you go to the places where people consume information, whether it's Facebook or Instagram? You know, in rural areas, what we found is it's not TikTok, but it's more the other. But how do we arm you with the tools and the facts? Because the facts are on our side. The economic development impacts, how do we highlight those? How do we, in a genuine way, support the communities we're in? And so I think from the National Trade Association perspective, that's what we can do at a local level. The state level is a little different. The states, I think we can be way more actively engaged. We can be more actively engaged than we are. We can't be everywhere, but we're in the states where you'd want us to be. and engaging constructively. I've heard a lot of talk in the hallway and conversations about, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if every state had state permitting rather than local control, right? But how do we manage and play the hand we're dealt? Like, there is going to be local control. So how do we encourage state policies that might incentivize others to view permitting decisions differently? There's a lot of examples. How do we be more aggressive in certain tax provisions in some places? It's really a mixed bag, but it's just us sitting at a table with the large IPPs and the utilities that are a part of our membership and figuring out where do we need to invest time and resources at a state level, then how do we leverage the work you're already doing so that it's constructive, but it's not destructive to what you're already doing in the states.
We had a conversation this morning about the right social media channels, and while TikTok may be not the medium today, it might be in 20 years if you ask your kids where they get their news. So we'll monitor that for a little bit further in the future. But JC, to your point about helping and arming folks with the resources to work on a local level, especially when you have a lot of local control, does ACP provide ordinances, model ordinances, types of materials like that can help facilitate constructive environments to go permit in?
We do, and Hillary is around here somewhere. She would kill me, and thank you for saving me, Dexter. We do have a local ordinance database that we've spent a lot of time building out. There's a lot of head nodding. It's always a work in process, right, and progress. And so, but as that is around more and we go refining that database, I do think it's something that really does provide value to folks. And I think model ordinances are also important. It's a lot to be a county commissioner, right? In any county, be it big or small. In smaller counties, even more, right? Because you don't have a large paid staff. You don't have all the things that you need to make smart decisions or informed decisions. I shouldn't say smart. I'll strike that. But informed decisions about the projects that you're being asked to permit. And so I think from our perspective, the model ordinances are important, the database is important, and it's something that we're committed to keeping up so that the users of that database have a tool that actually is of real value at a local level.
Yeah, and we at NextEra, we certainly reference a lot of ACP's model ordinances, and we all know it's a starting point. Customize it for your local state, local counties, and make sure it works for you, because it's not one size fits all, but it's an important starting point on the principles of where you should start from, right?
Yeah, and it just, it's timely, right? And I think model ordinances are in some ways important because they help dispel maybe less informed, I hate to use the term misinformation, but a lot of times it is, on some complicated topics, right? And it, I think, takes out some of the guesswork out of things like, what do we do with storage? What is a thermal event? What does, the things that you, again, are dealing with on a daily basis, I think provides that extra little bit of help.
Yeah, we've got a great panel after this that actually is going to address the topic of misinformation specifically, so we won't steal their thunder and keep moving from here. Moving to data centers, we talked a little bit about that, but this is one of those interesting dynamics that didn't really exist maybe a couple of years ago, where we're permitting wind solar projects, but now we're starting to see the presence of data centers as well. What have you observed in terms of the interaction between those technologies and pieces of infrastructure as we move forward into this hyperscaler world of data centers?
First, just the voracious appetite, right? I stood in the back and saw a little bit about water consumption, and even if that number was close, holy cow. So voracious appetite for power, and they want it now. And I think there is some concern that we, as a country, won't be able to deliver all the power we need to keep them from looking other places, and we already know they are, right? They're looking in Canada, they're looking in some places in Southeast Asia, they're looking, they just need the power. And so how do we partner with them to bring the power? And you guys are reading the news as much as I am, right? And in these discussions, one wanting to bring a nuclear plant behind the meter, talk about bringing gas assets behind the meter, talk about bringing wind and solar behind the meter, all these things so that there's it's super inefficient when we bring it behind the meter because obviously they want redundancy as well. So you're building 2x of whatever you think you would need because you want redundant systems. And then I think what is a very live discussion and debate across the country is who pays for it and who are they paying their fair share, right? And who's left to with the burden of paying for it. At the end of the day, it's largely the rate base. So how do we do that in a way that's fair and equitable? And I live in Virginia, and it's a very, very hot topic in Virginia because Virginia happens to have a tech corridor where Amazon and others are there, and they're building big data centers, and Dominion's doing their best to deliver the power, but they can't. And so it is, I think, something where we haven't seen, the final or best resolution yet. I assume we will here, but in the interim, they just need more power. They need more electrons.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And our wind and solar projects that can deliver near term are super important for that.
Super.
So JC, Virginia, of course, being the epicenter of a huge amount of data center development, one of the things, it's an interesting topic because there are so many developers out there, direct hyperscaler development of data centers, data center operators who are trying to market to the hyperscalers. How do you tell what's real, what's not, given there's an overabundance of developments and process? Just as it comes to our communities, they're trying to discern what's real or not. How do we help figure that out?
That's a tough question. I think what we know is real is the market saying that there's going to be explosive demand growth. I think the number was crazy. Just the hyperscalers, just the current forecasts are like 100 gigawatts of power. That is a lot of power. And the demand curve seems to be playing out, right? It grew 5% year over year. I was in Chicago yesterday speaking at another financial forum, and they were talking about how the capital is ready because it's there. The demand, they believe in the demand profile. So I think it remains to be seen as just someone who is, I guess, has a better seat than most watching this play out. Are some of the crazy financial models around this real? Like, would someone bring gas behind the meter for a 5-year to depreciate over 5 years? All these questions, I think, still remain to be seen. I think the only constant in that is that they still are going to draw electrons from the grid. They will. And so, again, it sounds like this is an infomercial for wind and solar, but it really is the thing that's there now, that's available, that's cost competitive, that has queue positions, that has material and meaningful financial backing, real developers behind it, that it's not speculative. Those projects are there. And again, they want that power. They don't want to be totally beholden to what they can bring behind the meter. And so I'm not the best at, you'd need to get Google or Meta or one of the others to tell you kind of what's real and what's not. But I do think that just in speaking to the financial community and the utilities that are serving the load and other, they believe it's real. And so I just have to take them for what they're saying because they're the ones that are going to put capital and put their names in front of it as they go to regulators and others.
I think that's the same as what we see. Your constant that you mentioned, JC, is the power supply. Not just wind and solar. We are tooting wind and solar, obviously. We're at our conference for it, but battery storage as well. And that's the constant. Lauren Schur from NextEra talked a little bit about our surplus storage as well. The ability to deliver capacity to the grid in support of a data center that needs power 24/7 is always critical for the success of the data center. So I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's the place to look for certainty.
And listen, you need a system, right? No, every technology has its bugaboos, right? It does. We could say we're intermittent. You could say gas isn't always available. It doesn't perform well in extreme cold. It doesn't, whatever. But that's why you have a system. And this country has shown that grid operators have the capacity and the ability, with some rare exceptions, to integrate that system. And I think that in that kind of spirit of you need an integrated system, we are a major part of that now, and we certainly are across the tech, wind, solar, and storage, a major part of that generation mix. But we do suffer now from the kind of maladies, I would say, of incumbency, right? It takes too long to site one of our projects. It does. We need transmission, and we can't wait for decades to do it. We need queue reform. We need the kinds of things. And FERC has kind of dipped its toe in that water, but not really. You need those types of things to facilitate the deployment of the infrastructure necessary to build these projects, to build your projects, to bring these economic benefits to the community. And without some of that, it's just going to take longer, right? And longer sometimes means that we maybe don't miss the whole moment, but we miss part of it. So we don't want to miss the moment.
Absolutely. So with just a few minutes left, JC, let's wrap this up here. If you had one takeaway message for this audience, what can all the various stakeholders in this group, all these attendees do to help advance renewables and storage going forward?
I just, keep doing what you're doing. You got to show up every day. You got to keep talking about how important this stuff is in this room to your community, because you're the voice that matters. I come in and out, and I really do appreciate these opportunities that I get to speak and evangelize on behalf of the industry, but I do think you really are who even the federal decision makers want to hear from you, right? It's like top down, it's bottom up, and if we can get that in those moments when it works, it really works well. And I think this, again, my glass is always half full with this industry, and I don't think that's naive. I think we have ridden out on the wind side. I've been the ups and downs of policy we've ridden through. On the solar side, we've ridden through trade issues. We rode through UFLPA. We're headed into foreign entity of concern and what that looks like in tax guidance. Where with this, in the storage, we've headed into similar things. But at the end of the day, this is a resourceful industry. It's an industry that can do, that figures it out, and that takes advantage of the moment. And you are critical to that, our ability to do that, because of what you do and who you represent, and what you represent in your communities and to the decision makers that want to hear from you. And so my fervent hope is that you just keep doing what you're doing. Right? I admire what you do. I'm thankful that I'm here again, but you are the ones that are making it happen. And so we're just providing you with the tools, but at the end of the day, you have the relationships at a local level to make this work.